Found it? Good. We were blaming so many people. Yeah. Well, good morning, everyone. Good to see everybody on this wonderful Lord's Day. Let's grab a songbook and turn to page 615 this morning. Start off with the song. 615. He keeps me singing. There's within my heart a melody. Jesus whispers sweet and low. Fear not, I am with thee. Peace be still. In all of life's ebb and flow. Jesus, 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 sweetest name I know, fills my every longing, keeps me singing as I go, feasting on the riches of His grace, resting 'neath His sheltering wing. Always looking on His smiling face. That is why I shout and sing. Jesus, 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 sweetest name I know, fills my every longing, keeps me singing as I go. Soon He's coming back to welcome me, far beyond the starry sky. I shall wing my flight to worlds unknown. I shall live with Him on high. Jesus, 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 sweetest name I know, fills my every longing, keeps me singing as I go. Is that going to bug you guys? All right, let's turn to 1 Kings chapter 1 this morning. 1 Kings chapter 1. We are going to be starting kind of a new era in the life of the Israelites. Up to this point, from Genesis all the way to the end of 2 Samuel, we've been looking at God leading His people, and we've seen them go up and down, and we've seen some pretty good stories about Adam and Eve and the Ark and Tower of Babel and all those kind of interesting stories that we can see God's love and God's forbearance and God's guidance as things happen in that particular area. But today we're going to... I can't talk over that. Okay. All right. Can y'all still hear me, though? Okay, great. No, that's it. Today we're going to be stepping away from King David. He's not done yet. We're going to see a little bit of his life still left at 1 Kings. But last week, if you remember, we saw the last few words that David spoke as a king. And the last few words of David's life were very honest, weren't they? If you remember, the prayer that he prayed was a statement not only for himself, but also to everybody that would listen to him from that day on till even today, that God gave him the opportunity to be a great king. God gave him the perfect characteristics for a great king. God gave him the perfect opportunity to be a great king, and he praised God for that. But also we saw David as he repented because he didn't use those advantages and he wasn't a good king on some occasions, that he fell short of some of those ambitious qualities that God wanted him to have, and he admitted that. And then he encouraged the children of Israel to continue to stay steadfast. And then we were introduced to his son Solomon, as he told Solomon that he is going to be the next king, and encouraged his son to continue in faith and continue in doing what was right. And we're going to see that also in the first few chapters of 1 Kings. But the first part of 1 Kings, we're going to see Solomon and his kingship. Solomon was put in a perfect situation. Now, David had given the perfect situation, but he still had to fight and kind of crawl his way up to get the kingdom where it was at, because King Saul had left it in such terrible shape. So King David had to work at it, and he had to do some things that were necessary to get the kingdom where it was at. But the kingdom that we're going to be seeing right now in 1 Kings is at the pinnacle of its height. At the first of King Solomon's reign, it is the pinnacle. It's the strongest. It's the powerfulest, or strongest, powerful is the same thing. But it's the most richest. It's the most influence, and it has influence all over the world. And we're going to be seeing that as we get in the study of 1 Kings, that people, that especially one queen, is going to come from far off, on the other side of the world, actually, to come because she's heard about Solomon and his wisdom and the wealth of the Israelites. So at this point, Solomon is going to be handed almost a silver tray, because David has done most of the work. And Solomon's going to be given wisdom, and we're going to see that. Solomon is going to be a pretty good king for the most part. But about halfway through 1 Kings, we're going to see that Solomon makes a big turn. He kind of has an alliance with the king of Egypt. He marries the king of Egypt's daughter, and we know that was a no-no. From the very beginning, God told Moses, do not intermarry. Remember that commandment? We saw that a number of times. Do not intermarry. Don't give in to the gods of the people that you're going through. Well, Solomon broke that rule. And from that point, we're going to see the kingdom of Israelite nation split. How many of you have heard of the divided kingdom? If you've been in the church very long, you've heard of the divided kingdom. That's Israel and that's Judah. And we're going to be introduced to that in 1 Kings also. And there's a lot of things that happen in 1 Kings and 2 Kings. That's why it's mentioned 1 and 2 Kings, because there are so many kings of the divided kingdom. And some pretty interesting things happen in those. There's some good kings and there's some bad kings. And God's going to use all that to try to get his people back to where they need to be. And also, in the midst of all these, we're going to be introduced to some prophets. And these prophets you'll know too. Some major and minor prophets are in these books that will be very interesting for us too as we look at this. So a lot of good stuff coming up, talking about the divided kingdoms. But before we get into that, things are still going good for Israel. Even though David's getting ready to die, the steadfastness, the foundation of the Israelite nation is rock solid because of David's steadfastness. And last week we saw David's last words encouraging his son and encouraging his people. Now in chapter 1 of 1 Kings, we're going to get a glimpse of the last few days of King David. Verse 1 of 1 Kings chapter 1. Now King David was old and advanced in years, and although they covered him with clothes, he could not get warm. Now, is that surprising? Someone that's elderly can't get warm? No. That's usually what happens, right? As your body gets older, blood gets thinner, and some other things happen, and it's hard to stay warm. So this shows us very clearly here that David wasn't a super being, was he, by any means? He was an individual that suffered just like we did, had ailments just like we did, had concerns just like we did, had faults just like we did. And he's to the age now, God blessed him to become old in this fashion, so that he was suffering from old age, the sufferings of old age. And it showed us here very clearly that he had to do something to stay warm. They didn't have electric blankets back in those days, but they did have young virgins. Look at verse 2. Therefore a servant said to him, let a young woman be sought for my lord the king, and let her wait on the king and be his servant. Let her lie in his arms, in your arms, that my lord the king may be warm. So they sought for a beautiful young woman throughout all the territory of Israel, and found Abishag the Shunammite, and brought her to the king. The woman was very beautiful, and she was a servant to the king and attended him, but the king knew her not. So we have 4 verses that show us David was a human being as he got older, that this particular incident of getting Abishag to lay with him, not in a sexual way, but in a way that would keep him warm. You might say, what good does that do us to have this? Why would the inspired writers, why would God want us to know this? Why would the writer of 1 Kings want us to know about Abishag? Well, that's a good question. I'm glad you asked it. Because Abishag is going to play a big part later on. So we're just introduced to Abishag and what she did. She was given the opportunity to lie with the king. So was that something big for a woman to be given that opportunity to do that? Again, there was no sexuality in it all, no sex at all, nothing like that. But to be a servant that way of the king. In fact, that's what the word said here. She was a servant to him, or she served him in this fashion. So that was a big deal for Abishag to be given this prominent position, right? So keep that in mind as we go further down into our study, because she's going to be brought back in to the study because of her status, of what she did with King David. Now in verse 5. This is a section, and we're going to go through some of this pretty rapidly till we get to the end of King David's life and the introduction to Solomon. Verse 5, Adonijah, this is one of David's sons, and he took upon himself, as King David was getting older, that he wanted to be king. Now, it's already been established, and we looked at this last week, and at the last of 2 Samuel, that Solomon was to be the next in succession of king. So, Adonijah was a son of Haggith, and he said to himself, I will be king. Again, he took upon himself. He usually got what he wanted to get, because if you look at verse 6, this kind of gives us a history of how David treated his son. His father had never at any time displeased him by asking. So this means, in some of your translations may something different, he was never denied anything. Now, have you ever seen a young man or a young woman that lived a life where they got everything they wanted? That was a pretty good individual, right? Spoiled individual, yeah. Now, that's not always the case. People can get what they want and they can have a good characteristic, but usually if you're fed by a silver spoon and you get everything you've ever wanted, you are deserving. You feel like you deserve everything, right? We know that. And sometimes maybe we even fall into that category a little bit. But this individual had it bad. He wanted to be king, and he had no right. So he took it upon himself, and he went to great extents. He went and got a priest. He went and got Joab. He confronted with them, Zadok. All these people got together, and he made himself king. Verse 9 says he went and he sacrificed sheep and ox, did all the things that a king usually did to be pronounced king. But he didn't invite. Look at verse 10. These are the individuals he didn't invite. And these are the ones that were the important ones. Nathan. They didn't invite Solomon. So now in verse 11 now, remember who Nathan was, right? Has Nathan played a part in King David's kingship? Remember what Nathan did to King David? Yeah. When David killed and had committed adultery and lied and tried to cover up, Nathan came to him and confronted him, right? And told him what was necessary. So Nathan played a big part. So now Nathan's still not finished in his role. So Nathan hears about what this son did. Then Nathan said to Bathsheba, the mother of Solomon, "Have you not heard that the son has become king, and David our Lord does not know it?" So does that surprise you that King David doesn't know that somebody now has become king? Maybe. But what state is King David in now? Is he probably bedridden? Probably. They don't have cell phones back in those days. They don't have computers. So more than likely, David did not know at this point. And the son took that for granted. He thought, this is an advantage for me. I will go and I will be able to influence the people of Israel. Now this shows us very clearly here how fickle the Israelites were. And we didn't need proof of that, did we? The Israelites go back and forth, don't they? Don?
I get the impression from the next few verses, people were scared to tell David, King David.
Yeah, oh yeah, no doubt about it. Because the son had some advantage. He had already got the commander of the armies. Yeah. So that tells you the fickleness of the Israelites at this point. How they needed a leader. And we've seen that. They needed a leader. And when David was strong and when David was able to lead and to be an example, they followed him. But as soon as David starts to get sickly and the son represents leadership now, some of the people are starting to follow him. And that's what's happened. Until Nathan gets involved. And King David does not know about his son doing this until Bathsheba comes to him. Through Nathan concocting a story. Or concocting, not really a story, but events like he did earlier with Uriah. Verse 12 says, "Now therefore come, let me give you advice, that you may save your own life and the life of your son Solomon." So why would Nathan say, you need to know what's going on because your life and the life of your son is in jeopardy? Why would he need to say that? His brother is going to do away with anybody that might jeopardize his kingship, right? You think he knows that Solomon is the next in line? Yeah, that's why he's done this. That's why he's went behind the backs of these individuals. So now Nathan goes to Bathsheba and says, "Bathsheba, this is what you need to do." This is verse 13. "Go in at once to King David and say to him, 'Did not my lord the king swear to your servants, saying, Solomon, your son shall reign after me, and he shall sit on my throne?'" Adonijah, and then why is Adonijah king? Then why are you still speaking with the king? I also will come in after you and confirm your words. So now he tells Bathsheba, this is what you're to say. You're to go into the king and you're to let him know what has happened. And if he doesn't believe you, as soon as you say these words, that's my key to come in and to affirm what has happened. So Bathsheba, which she has some say. Now at this point, Bathsheba was not an influential person with David. We know that because David had got a few other wives since then, and Bathsheba kind of stepped out of the picture. But she was still the mother of Solomon. So after Bathsheba came in and told what was going on, Nathan was going to come in and confirm her words. So Bathsheba went to the king in his chambers, and the king was very old, and Abishag, the Shumite, was attending to the king. Bathsheba bowed and paid homage to the king, and the king said, "What do you desire?" So, what usually happened when a wife went into a king? Yeah, she could be killed. But usually if the king didn't kill her, what would happen? The king offered anything that they'd want. If you tell me what you desire and you'll get. Now we know David had many wives and concubines. Do you think he knew when he saw a wife coming before his presence what that meant? She wants something, right? Yeah, no doubt about it. So this is what he says here. Doesn't know why she's there yet. But she says, what do you want? What does your heart desire? And now verse 17, she is going to tell him what's been going on while he has been in bedridden. He has taken over, the son has taken over, verse 18, and now the Lord is king. My Lord, he is king, and you don't even know it. He has sacrificed oxen, verse 19 says. He has done everything that has been commanded. He's invited the priests, Joab, the commander of your army. So it looks like that he has now the right to become king. Have individuals in the history of Israel, or in the history of the life of Israel, not the king of Israel yet, but in the world, have people become king on lesser authority than this? The answer to that is yes. Now, not yet in Israel, because God gave Saul the opportunity to become king and then David, but in the sexual life, whether it be Egypt or whether it be anybody, if you are just strong enough, you could create a coup and you could become the leader, right? And we've seen that happen in our lifetimes too. So, this son went to great extremes to make it look like it was legal. And people were following him. A large crowd were following him. But now, Nathan is telling King David, this is what you need to do. Verse 21, otherwise it will come to pass, then my lord the king sleeps with his fathers, that I and my son Solomon will be counted offenders. So, Nathan, Bathsheba, come to King David in his sick bed and say, you need to do something because Solomon doesn't look like he's going to be king. And if you don't do something, myself, which is Bathsheba, and your son will be counted offenders, and they will be put to death. Now, verse 12. While she was saying this is a cue for who? For Nathan. While she was still speaking with the king, Nathan, the prophet, came in and told the king the very same thing Bathsheba has just said. So, confirming what Bathsheba said, Nathan says the same thing. So he's told him that something needed to be done immediately. Look at verse 27. Has this thing been brought about by my lord the king, and you have told your servant who's to sit on the throne of my lord the king after him? So, asking the king, is this what you want? And now we're going to see that King David in verse 28 realizes this is not what I want at all. So, the last part of chapter 1, we're going to see that now David is going to take this matter into his own hands. He's going to call Bathsheba in. She comes in, and the king swore to her, this is verse 29, as the Lord lives, who has redeemed my soul out of every adversity, as I swore to you by the Lord, the God of Israel, saying, Solomon, your son, shall reign after me, and he shall sit on my throne in my place. Even so I will do this today. So, the idea that Nathan had to do with Bathsheba, did it work? It did. Was anybody going to go and tell David what was going on if Nathan wouldn't have? Maybe not till it was too late. Just as Don said earlier, later on we're going to see that he had the commander of the army. So if you get the commander of the army on your side, who's also on your side? The army, right? How many militaries have overrun governments? Every single one that's ever been done has been done by somebody overtaking the army or getting the army on their side. So now we know why maybe no one would go and tell David until Nathan came. And when David heard about it, we're going to see that David took matters in his own hands. And because of that, and you can see what David did. He went out and got the priest, verse 28, Zadok, the priest, Nathan, the prophet, all these individuals went down. They got Solomon on a mule, the king's mule, by the way, and put Solomon on it, ran him into the Jerusalem in that area, and Solomon was made king. Now, look at chapter 2 of 1 Kings. After now Solomon was made king, this is what's happened because of that fact. When David came to die, drew near, he commanded Solomon his son, saying, I am about to go the way of the earth. Be strong and show yourself a man, and keep the charge of the Lord your God, walking in his ways and keeping his statutes, his commandments, his rules, and his testimonies, as it is written in the law of Moses, that you may prosper in all that you do and wherever you turn. That the Lord may establish his word that he spoke concerning me, saying, if your sons pay close attention to their way to walk before me in the faithfulness with all their heart, with all their soul, you shall not lack a man on the throne of Israel. So, David is confiding now in, this is a young Solomon, and we're going to see that in a minute. David himself is even going to confess that. He's going to say in the next few words that Solomon is not to the age where he can make solid decisions, so I'm going to get this temple started. I'm going to make provisions for these kings around to start sending material to you so that you and you alone can build this, the foundations of the kingdom, whether it be the temple or whether it be the house of Solomon. So all of chapter 2, that's David getting ready, David getting Solomon ready to do this. And it's also the point where we see some individuals, another son, tried to take the kingdom of David again, Absalom. And that's mentioned in chapter 2, verses 7 through 9. Now, verse 10, this is the end of David's life. Then David slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David. And the time of David reigned over Israel was 40 years. He reigned 7 years in Hebron and 13 years in Jerusalem. So Solomon sat on the throne of David his father, and his kingdom was firmly established. So again, Solomon was given a kingdom that was firm, right? David had done all the work. Solomon was there, he saw it. Do you think he marveled at the things that God did in David's life? You think David talked about Goliath to his sons? I would think so. Wouldn't that be a good story to tell to your sons? Or about the things that happened to him as he was the harp player for King Saul? I mean, David lived a pretty great life, an adventurous life, a life of faithfulness. Do you think he told his sons about his downfalls? Do you think he mentioned Bathsheba and Uriah? We don't know, but we know that I'm sure they knew about it. Would that be good learning experiences too? I don't know about you fathers, but on my account, I talk to my children about the good times, but also instruct them about some mistakes that I have made to benefit them, right? So that they won't make those same mistakes. So Solomon, no doubt, saw all this, heard all this. God appointed Solomon as king, and we know throughout history God appoints kings and he did it for a reason. And now Solomon is going to reign in the place of his father, and he has a perfect opportunity to be a great king. He has all the means. He has all the army. He has all the faithfulness at this point in his life. And now we see in verse 13, the son, Adonijah, came to Bathsheba, the mother of Solomon, and said, "Do you come peacefully?" So, what do you think the son is afraid of now? The son that tried to become king. If Bathsheba was afraid that he would put her to death, what is he afraid now of? That he would be put to death, right? That makes sense. So now he's afraid. He's afraid that he is going to be put to death. But verse 14 says, "And he said, I have something to say to you." She said, "Speak." He said, "You know that the kingdom was mine, and that all Israel fully expected me to reign," which was not a truth. "However, the kingdom was turned back and became my brother's, for it was his from the Lord. And now I have one request to be made of you, to not refuse me." And said to him, "Speak." So, verses 17, he says, I want to make sure that you don't kill me. Go to the king. Make sure that the king knows that I'm not going to do anything to harm him. And he grabs a hold of the horns of the altar in verse 19 and hangs on to that in representation of, I'm going to stay here around the mercy seat till I get some mercy. That's what that's representing. So Solomon hears about this, so he goes and gets this brother, half-brother, by the way. And in verse 23 says, "Then King Solomon swore by the Lord, saying, Go, do not do, and more as his word does not cost Adonijah his life. Now therefore, as the Lord lives, you shall have established me and placed me on the throne of David my father, and who has made me a house as he promised." So, King Solomon said here at the end, make sure that you don't do anything against me, and I won't do anything against you. No, we're at chapter 2 now. Well, yes, I'm referring to where he was at. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes. He went back, after he found out King Solomon became king, he ran to the altar. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, clarifying that. Yeah. Yes, you're right. Yeah. So, now we're going to see that after that happened, King Solomon said, don't do anything against you. That's in chapter 1. But now in chapter 2, we're going to see that he is going to use Abishag. Now, going back to the one that he got, Abishag, who did now this brother want to make his wife? Abishag. So was that going against the rule of Solomon, you think? Yeah, no doubt. Yes. That was a big statement. And Solomon had already mentioned that. We didn't read it, but I alluded to that area. You can go back and read that. Solomon said, I won't kill you, but you better do what's right. Never go against me again. You'll be safe. I won't harm a hair on your head, but never go against me again. So what was the first thing the brother did? He went and got King David's servant, that one that laid with him, kept him warm. So was that a statement? Was this brother done with trying to become king, you think? Don.
He also went about it in a sneaky way, trying to get
Yeah.
The king to be forced.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It was a way that it wasn't right. Again, Solomon said, act justly, and I won't hurt you. But the minute that you don't act justly, you will die. And that's what's going to happen. But in verse 20, let's go down to 2 King again. Again, I apologize for going back. We're going to stick with 2 Kings now. Verses 13 through 46, Solomon's reign is established. Steadfastness. There's no doubt about it. Now in chapter 3 of 1 Kings. This is something that we're aware of. We've read this before. We've done sermons on it, I'm sure. This is Solomon when God shows his satisfaction with Solomon. Because now Solomon is going to be given a gift from God, right? Has anybody in here on Christmas Day been told by their parents, you ask me for anything you want and it doesn't matter the cost, and I will get it for you? Anybody ever had a parent like that? Anything you want, anything your heart desires, you can have it. And if I don't have the money, I'll go borrow the money and get what you want. Nobody's ever done that, right? Well, not anybody that I know of. Well, that's what's happened here. God comes to Solomon now and says, Solomon, I am so pleased with you because of what you've said. Because first of all, God gave him the opportunity to ask for riches. That's what we find in chapter 3. We're not going to read that. I want you to do that on your own, but you know this story well enough. God comes to Solomon and says, tell me what you want because I'm so pleased with you, and you'll get it. Solomon could have asked for riches. He could have asked for commanding of army. He could ask for anything. But Solomon asked for what? What kind of wisdom? Ruling wisdom. Now, this is going to play a big part because God did give him the wisdom to rule right. But the wisdom of being faithful, he did not ask for. And we're going to see that was his downfall. He had wisdom. I mean, what did Solomon write? How many Proverbs did Solomon write? That's what Proverbs is about. It's about the wisdom book. In Ecclesiastes, we see Solomon having wisdom on how to live and doing the things that would make a life easier as living in a nation. But faithfully and the wisdom of religion, we're going to see he fell short of. But he did have the wisdom. And because God saw that, and he didn't ask for money or he didn't ask for pleasures or whatever, God said, I'm going to give you that wisdom to rule, and you're going to be a good ruler. But I'm also going to give you everything else that you didn't ask for. Now, you think Solomon was playing a trick on God? He said in his mind, if I ask for this, God's going to give me this other thing. No doubt. Solomon had that kind of heart, right? To start off, Solomon had a good characteristic in asking God for, I want to lead my people. I want to do what's right. He had a good mentor, didn't he? In his father. And now he sees that he's going to have wisdom and he's going to have that opportunity. Now in verse 16, we're going to end this morning with this. And again, we're familiar with this too. This just shows us Solomon's wisdom. The prostitutes that came to him, one laid over on another one's son, killing him. She took the other son, said it was his. We know this story. This is just one of, I'm sure, the opportunities that Solomon used his wisdom. Because he knew that the true mother would stand up. And this shows us that this was a practice at this day and time for babies to be killed. And we're going to get into that this morning a little bit in our worship service. That this was not something that was shunned from, babies being killed. It was a practice. Baal had altars that they would kill their babies and whether it was a baby boy or a baby girl, they would kill their children. And some of the Israelites bought into that. So this shows us very clearly that this mother was afraid, hey, he could do it. Nowadays, when a parent says, oh, you better not do that or I'm going to kill you. We know it's not true, right? And I don't want you to admit to saying that, but we've heard it say before, right? Oh, I'm going to, We know it doesn't mean anything, but at this point, it meant something. This mother knew that Solomon could kill her son. And that's why she stood up and said, I'd rather the baby live with somebody else than be killed. That was a good test, wasn't it? And we know the end result. The true mother was revealed because of the wisdom of Solomon. Now, could God have gave Solomon a vision to tell Solomon which one was which? Could have, but that wouldn't have been the wisdom that he asked for. God gave him the wisdom to come up with a test to reveal, right? And that's the wisdom that we have today. God doesn't give this wisdom to prophesy us. You need to be careful of that. Don't do that, or do this, or whatever the case may be. But how do we get wisdom today? By looking at God's Word and coming up with the right answer. That's what wisdom does. That's what wisdom did for Solomon, and that's what wisdom does for us today also, right? It gives us the wisdom we need to make the right decisions. All right, any comments on, again, we went through all this pretty rapidly. You can take the time to do that. We're hitting some high points in these, trying to get to the divided kingdom, and that's when we're going to stop and we're going to look at some of these kings. All right, let's all bow for a word of prayer, and then we'll be dismissed and we'll continue our service. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the time you've given us to open up your Word and to study Old Testament history. We love you so much. We want to glorify you with the life that you've given.